Indiana Congressman Mike Pence joins us right now.
Hey, Neil.
It would appear, Congressman, to be a little too early to be investigating anyone's response in this crisis, right? I mean, we got to deal with the crisis, don't we?
Well, of course we have to deal with the crisis. This is an ongoing tragedy, not only for the environment, but for the families and businesses affected in the region. And the American people expect our federal government to take action, but they also expect answers. I mean, the American people want this Congress to get to the bottom of what happened on April the 20th, but I think they also want to get to the bottom of why this administration was so slow to respond. The administration essentially did not fully deploy cabinet-level officials until April the 28th, 8 days after the explosion. The president, of course, didn't address it significantly until 9 days after the explosion. So, yes, we need to be continuing to respond.
Well, a lot of you guys were the same way, right? No, but a lot of you guys were the same way. And I know he's the president, he's in charge, and you're right to do that. And Democrats did that with President Bush during Katrina. But when this first occurred and there was the crack in the rig and it collapsed and those 11 guys went missing, most treated it as what seemed to be a search and rescue mission, and that the oil was contained and we were looking for these 11 missing guys now presumed dead. And we went on the assurances of the company, BP in this case, that was apparently telling everybody that was the focus and not the oil. So we should have done more, you're saying, and they should have done more.
Well, I don't know what the answers are, Neil. I think Congress ought to be asking the questions. I think, you know, today the administration said those of us that are saying the American people deserve answers were, quote, badly misinformed. Well, you know, the administration, I think 3 days after the incident occurred, were, according to the Associated Press, dismissing the severity of it. The New York Times, in an editorial on May the 1st, actually said, and I quote, "The administration should not have waited, should have intervened much more quickly." Well, I don't know if that's the case, but I know that all of this repetition about day one, the full force of the federal government was there on day one is belied by the facts and by the timeline. It is, again, to quote the New York Times, which I don't do often, the timeline is damning here. So I think Congress has a duty. We need to make sure that the resources are available to protect both the people, the businesses, and the environment of the Gulf against this ongoing disaster. But I also think we ought to immediately be about the business of getting answers about what happened on April 20th, why did this rig blow, and we ought to get some answers about why the federal government at so many levels was slow to respond.
So if you're quick to try to want to get answers on who knew what and when, which is a very legitimate concern, then how do you feel about those who then seized on this disaster to just say stop all offshore oil production until we get to the bottom of this?
Well, I think it's a very real concern. Clearly, there are those in the environmental left and in public life today who are trying to exploit this catastrophe to deny the American people more access to American oil. You know, House Republicans, we held the House floor back a couple of years ago to demand a lifting of the long-term moratorium on offshore drilling. The president just a little while back said he was open to a certain small amount of offshore drilling off Virginia and other places. But now, in the wake of this catastrophe, this ongoing disaster, now there are those that want to deny the American people more access to American oil.
But wouldn't it be prudent, Congressman, just to, all right, this rig collapsed and it started spilling a lot more oil than anyone thought, all sides. Let's just wait to see what the heck happened. If this were to happen again, we'd have egg on our face or oil on our face all over again.
Well, if you're saying, do I think that we ought to suspend any additional offshore domestic exploration while we get to the bottom of this incident, I ask why. If that made any sense, then we should suspend any oil production on the existing rigs in the Gulf of Mexico, and people would recognize that that is ridiculous. The American people deserve action in the Gulf to confront this widening disaster, but they also deserve answers about what happened on the 20th. Make sure it never happens again, but also we got to, you know, the federal government has got to respond quicker than 8 days with the full force of the government to a disaster like this.
Congressman, good to see you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.
Well, a new